The conference room buzzed with chatter as I glanced at my phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from Ryan. I stepped out into the hallway expecting the usual small talk. "How's the trip? When will you be home?" Instead, Ryan's voice came through cold and smug. "I'm divorcing you," he said, his tone almost triumphant. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse, was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as his words sank in. "You sold the apartment?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah," he said with a dry laugh. "Sophia and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway." Sophia. The name stung. I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Ryan's late nights, sudden work trips, and the growing distance between us all pointed to a third party. But hearing him speak her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. "Sounds good," I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving him the satisfaction of hearing me crack. My name is Madison, and up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a man I could trust. Ryan and I'd been together for 6 years. While things hadn't always been perfect, I believed in our partnership. We'd worked hard to buy our apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I fell in love with the moment I saw it. It wasn't just a home, it was the symbol of everything we'd built together, or at least, that's what I thought. Looking back, there had been signs, small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Ryan's dismissive attitude whenever I asked about finances, his tendency to brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I'd always assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing he could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Ryan thought he'd won. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd worked so hard for, and walk away scot-free. But there was one crucial detail he didn't know. The apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Ryan had agreed to without much thought, because it meant a lower interest rate. He never bothered to ask about the details or read the paperwork he signed. His carelessness was going to be his undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Ryan wanted a fight. Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Harper, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in painstaking detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. "He sold the apartment?" she repeated, incredulous. "Does he even realize he can't do that without your consent?" "Apparently not," I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. "He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Sophia." Harper laughed dryly. "Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if he's taken any money from the buyer, he's on the hook for fraud." The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. "What do we need to do?" I asked. "First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Harper said. "Then we'll draft a formal letter for Ryan, outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take him to court." As I hung up, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Ryan thought he'd outsmarted me, that he'd left me powerless and scrambling. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Ryan's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready. Ready to face Ryan. Ready to dismantle his lies. Ready to start a new chapter without him. This wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to reflect on how everything had unraveled. Ryan's arrogance was astounding. He hadn't even tried to hide his betrayal, as if I were just another obstacle to bulldoze on his path to freedom. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Ryan thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I'd been playing the long game without even knowing it. As the plane touched down, my first call was to Harper. "I'm back," I said, hauling my suitcase off the luggage carousel. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked to say the least, and not too happy with Ryan. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. "And Ryan?" I asked. "I sent the formal letter to his email this morning," Harper said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be furious." Good, I thought. Let him stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Ryan's things were still there, his jacket draped over the chair, his shoes carelessly tossed by the door, but the place felt different, like the energy had shifted. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Ryan came storming in that evening, his face red with anger and his phone clutched in his hand. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the letter Harper had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No, Ryan," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze, his face a mixture of confusion and rage. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for him to see. "After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it. Remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I stared at him unblinking. "The sale is already void, Ryan. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Oh, and speaking of money, if you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble." Ryan's confidence wavered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice steady. "You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Ryan? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." He started pacing, frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear. I'm not going to let you get away with this." Over the next few days, Ryan's anger turned into desperation. He called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Harper worked behind the scenes to ensure every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Ryan for wasting their time and money. Harper drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. "You're in a good position, Madison," she told me during one of our meetings. "Ryan has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess." Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I had allowed Ryan to control my life. For years, I'd ignored his dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now, I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Lily, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Ryan's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, holding up one of his gray ties with a smirk. "Not well," I said, laughing despite myself. "He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," she said, tossing the tie into the box. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or a second of your time." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Ryan took credit for everything. But now, I had people in my corner, and that made all the difference. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Ryan brought Sophia to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table, reviewing some paperwork, when they walked in like they owned the place. Sophia looked around with a smug smile, her arm looped through Ryan's. "So, this is where we're staying?" she asked, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said firmly. "This is where Ryan was staying. You, Sophia, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered and she glanced at Ryan, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment around me, "is my home. Not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you two to shack up in after stabbing me in the back." Sophia's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Ryan, on the other hand, looked like he was about to explode. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You're being unreasonable." I met his gaze unflinching. "No, Ryan, what's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, walk away with the money and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges. For now." Ryan stood in the doorway, his face red with frustration, while Sophia crossed her arms, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous, Madison," he said, his voice laced with desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is my home, Ryan. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know that. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do. So, no, this isn't your home anymore." Sophia turned to Ryan, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her purse strap. "Wait, what's she talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." Ryan flinched, trying to wave her off. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I said, stepping closer. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That sale is void, Ryan, and as of right now, you don't have a leg to stand on." Sophia's composure cracked. "You mean the money? The money you told me you had?" She stopped, staring at him in disbelief. Mid-sentence, her voice rose. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" Sophia gasped, taking a step back. "Let me explain," Ryan said quickly, holding his hands up. But she wasn't having it. "No," I said, cutting him off. "Let me explain." I turned to Sophia, keeping my voice steady. "Ryan tried to sell the apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago. So not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could." Sophia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Fraud?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Are you serious?" "Yes, fraud," I repeated, crossing my arms. "And I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day." Ryan's confident facade finally cracked. You can't do this, Madison," he stammered, his voice dropping to a pleading tone. "We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out." I looked him square in the eye, my voice hardening. "You threw me out the moment you made that phone call. You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Ryan. You tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim." Sophia took another step back, her eyes darting between us. "This is insane," she muttered, clutching her purse tighter. "You didn't tell me any of this. You said you had everything handled." Ryan turned to her, desperation all over his face. "Sophia, I can fix this. I just need—" "Don't!" she snapped, raising a hand to cut him off. "Just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Ryan standing there stunned. I couldn't help but smile as the door clicked shut behind her. "Looks like you're on your own," I said, turning back to him. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." Ryan slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Madison, please. I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this." "You're right," I said, grabbing a folder from the kitchen counter and placing it on the coffee table in front of him. "I don't have to do this, but I'm going to." He lifted his head slowly, his face pale. This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drafted it. I suggest you sign it, quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on." He stared at the folder, his expression hollow. "You really hate me that much?" he whispered. "Hate you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Ryan, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything, someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stood tall, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace." He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "And don't even think about trying anything else. Harper's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it." As I opened the door, Ryan slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at me as he walked out, his footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him but for the life we could have had if he'd been the man I thought he was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with a new key I'd made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Ryan, would take it away from me again. The silence in the apartment after Ryan left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with his presence, his entitlement, or his lies. The realization hit me. I had won. Not just against Ryan, but against every doubt I had ever carried about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his things had been. His oversized gaming chair, the framed jerseys that had cluttered the walls, and the gaudy coffee table he had insisted on keeping all gone. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, like it was mine again. That evening, Lily came by with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Is he really gone?" she asked, plopping down on the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Gone and not coming back," I replied, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave him until the end of the day to pack his things. He didn't argue. Lily raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lift. To never letting someone walk all over me again. Over the next few days, I began reclaiming the apartment piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just redecorating. It was about turning the apartment into a reflection of me, not the person Ryan had tried to make me. Harper called with updates on the legal proceedings. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. "The fraud charges are off the table," she explained. "The buyer decided not to pursue them, but the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Ryan signs, you'll be officially free." Hearing the word free made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about everything I'd been carrying for years, the resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage where I wasn't valued. It was all finally being lifted. Ryan tried to reach out a few times. His messages ranged from half-hearted apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt me into reconciling. "I made a mistake. Can't we at least talk about this?" One message read. Another was more desperate. "You're going to ruin me, Madison. Is that what you want?" I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. He had made his choices. Now he had to deal with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new space, warm, inviting, and entirely mine. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window, I reflected on everything that had happened. Ryan's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long, I had let myself believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love he decided to throw my way, but now I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was unrecognizable, not because of any drastic renovations, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected me, my tastes, my personality, my newfound independence. Without Ryan's clutter and his overbearing presence, the home felt lighter, freer. The divorce moved along smoothly. Harper had handled everything with precision, ensuring Ryan had no room to argue or complicate the process. He signed the papers without much fuss, likely realizing he had no leverage left. There was no grand showdown, no emotional plea to work things out, just a cold, clean break. It felt bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One afternoon, as I sorted through some old papers, I came across a photo of Ryan and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arms around each other, full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. We thought we were building a life together, but those moments were long gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and slipped it into a drawer. It wasn't worth keeping out in the open, but I wasn't quite ready to throw it away either. It was a part of my past. But it didn't define me anymore. Lily and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules." We toasted to that. As the night went on, a growing sense of pride settled over me. I had faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I started planning for the future. The apartment had become more than just a refuge, it was a symbol of everything I had reclaimed. But deep down, I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one without any lingering shadows of my life with Ryan. Until then, I was determined to make the most of every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. That night, as I curled up on the couch, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about the day Ryan had called, how he'd laughed, so sure that he'd won. And I couldn't help but smile. His arrogance had been his downfall. My quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I called the shots. One where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long, long time, I felt truly free. If there's one lesson I'd share from my story, it's this. Never underestimate your own strength. Sometimes the people we trust the most can let us down, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. In fact, those moments of betrayal can be the push we need to rediscover ourselves. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel small or stuck, remember, you have the right to take back your power. Set boundaries. Walk away from what no longer serves you. The hardest decisions often lead to the most freeing outcomes. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to settle. Your happiness is your responsibility, and you deserve a life where you choose your own path. Healing takes time, but I promise you'll come out stronger. Trust your instincts. Stand your ground, and never forget. You are capable of so much more than you think. Good luck, and thank you for listening to my story.